morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Okay, beautiful, wonderful. So I love coming to the Balkan region because at the end of the day, it's a little bit settled, right? Everybody's got to get going, get the energy going. So I'm going to ask everybody to stand up real quick. Come on, stand up. Stand up. Come on. Come on. Come on. I know it's hard. I know it's tough. But we have to do this. And we have to do this because we have to get you out of your comfort zone. You know, I'm a futurist grounded in the reality of now. And the funny part about being a futurist is you travel the world to more than 60 countries, as I have, is that in different parts of the world, certain cultures are different, right? And the culture here, I love the culture here, spend a lot of time in Slovenia, a lot of time in Serbia, a decent amount of time in Italy as well. What I appreciate about this culture is the collective values and the collective nature of all of you and why you're here. How many of you are here because you believe that you want to make a difference in the world someday? Raise your hand. Right? It would be kind of weird if you were at the largest startup conference in this region and you didn't raise your hand, right? Okay, you can sit back down now. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to survive in a 21st century world and how to thrive in that world. I don't know how the title got a little bit messed up. I guess it was lost in translation. Surprise, surprise, right? So, thriving in a 21st century world, right? We live in this small blue dot in this big ocean called a galaxy, right? And as the last gentleman talked about in his presentation, we're 7.4 billion human beings on a planet, right? The interesting part that I find as I travel around the world time in and time out is that most of the time we spend our energy on something, and I see most of you on it right now, on this small little device. Love it or hate it, what you're doing is you're missing out on the reality of now. That's why I'm a futurist of now, because we spend so much time living reality TV on our phones instead of actually living in the reality of now. So what does that mean and why does that matter? Well, we're on the edge of a very smart future, right? We are on the precipice of something that our brains can't even handle. And it's called exponential change. How many of you know the word exponential? Raise your hand. Right? So the interesting thing about where we're going as a world is the fact that when exponential change comes our way, as our brains continue to stay as they have for the past roughly 100,000 years, we truly cannot understand the inflection point of what's about to happen. And why does that matter? Because you are so used to looking for the obvious, particularly in cultures in this region of the world. But if you're looking for the obvious, you are truly oblivious. Think about that for a second. It might sound idealistic, but it's the truth. Because the rapid amount of change that is coming your way, that is happening every single day in many different industries, in many different nations, socioeconomically, geopolitically, are happening so rapidly that your brain can't even keep up. The news cycle can't even keep up. How many of you know the human being called Donald Trump? Raise your hand. Right? So, I'll tell you a quick story about my friend Donald Trump. My last global speaking tour, I'm on one now, my last global speaking tour last fall, everywhere I went, whether it was Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Tel Aviv, Dhaka, Bangladesh, every single place I showed up, and you have to open up your passport and say, here's my visa. Oh, you American. What do you think about Donald Trump? Right? And it was really interesting because everywhere in the world, everybody knew who he was. Now, besides him being a marketing genius, the other thing that's really interesting to understand about the phenomenon of Donald Trump is exponential technology, is the fact that you are so used to looking for the obvious, right? That's what he's playing on. He's playing on 3 simple platforms, 5 simple sentences, and at the end of the day, what he's doing is talking about things in a way that our media cannot keep up with. The reason the media in America cannot keep up with Donald Trump is because they're addicted to what Donald Trump has to say, and he knows that. They know that the more they can churn out stories, the more that Donald Trump says things that are just asinine, the more they're going to coverage him. They're going to cover him, they're going to cover him, they're going to cover him, they're going to cover him. And that might not make a lot of sense yet. But the point is, Donald Trump got $2 billion in free advertising revenue by simply understanding the fact that the media needs to be exponential with their stories, over and over and over and over. Right? So why does that matter? Well, at the end of the day, our world faces a lot of challenges. Right? Our environment has fallen victim to exploitation. Our governments have started to fall into dictatorship. We have healthcare that is now turning into sick care. And most importantly, when it comes to this conference, most of the time, we have a lot of really smart humans who think it's a great thing to turn a business into a monopoly. I don't believe in monopolies at all, in any way, shape, or form. And the reason why is because there's a tsunami coming. The last presentation was phenomenal. And it literally was talking about this tsunami of exponential change that is already here. It's now, you just don't realize it, right? I'm here to tell you the bad news, and the bad news is your families, your communities, your cities, your nations, how they're structured, how they think, how they change, how dynamic they are. You cannot understand what is about to happen in the next decade. They're fundamentally going to restructure themselves in real time. Now that doesn't exactly make sense. How does a nation restructure itself in real time, right? That's a great question. The gentleman who was up here first was talking about a borderless nation, right? There's a lot of issues when it comes to this thing called capitalism. And there's obviously other ways in which you can structure an economy. But when it comes to capitalism, how many of you have kind of heard the story that capitalism is a great thing because over the past 100 years, you're about 70 times better than you were? How many of you have heard that story? Not too many of you, right? Well, what they don't tell you, and the reason why the last presentation was so interesting, and what it proves is the fact that if we did have borderless nations, which is kind of an oxymoron, for instance, you would actually be about 10,000 times better. So the things you saw in that movie, Back to the Future, how many of you have seen Back to the Future? Raise your hand, right? Flying cars and those types of things. If the profit mongers who we talked about on the last slide actually had allowed us to innovate, had allowed us to create, because we all sitting here today are all creators. If we were allowed to do that through economic opportunity, participation, and inclusion, we literally would already have flying cars, right? The reason why the tsunami matters is because you have an emergent phenomenon called disruption that is being facilitated through technology, information technology, that is buttressing up against a culture and an ideology in a way in which we think about justice in the world. To make it more simple, the future of the world, my friends, is actually pretty simple, right? You have innovation, and it's accelerated by technology. Technology is neither good nor bad, it just accelerates intent. Both technology and innovation combine together to create a culture in real time, right? Those three buckets put together then combine to create justice. I spend a lot of time traveling the world talking about justice. What is innovation justice? What is criminal justice? Let me give you a quick example, right? I was just in Kabul, Afghanistan, right? A lot of folks are like, Gary, I don't understand. You talk about this tsunami and you talk about innovation. What does that have to do with national defense? Well, guess what? The future of this world is innovation, is creation. The only pungent national defense strategy for any country in the 21st century is allowing all of you to do why you raised your hand, which is to create, is to innovate, is to make the world a better place. But the thing about humanity is we've become so isolated. We've become so disjointed. We spend more time looking at reality TV than the true reality that we live in. At the end of the day, what we need to understand is that we need to be humans as a community first and together, as brothers, as sisters, as a species. And there's a couple simple rules. I mean, it's actually kind of common sense, right? You would think. But I can guarantee you, most of you don't write down your hopes, your dreams, and your goals, and then put them and buttress them against these values. Because the thing about the next way in which the world works, it's not about money, it's not about power, it's not about greed. What the future of this new world is about culture. As I told you, innovation and technology are going to manifest culture. Culture is rooted in a bunch of shared values. And those shared values, like these behind me, are what's going to be the determining factor between being happy, healthy, and having the ability to take care of your family going forward in life. Those are basically the three universal things that every human being cares about. And at the end of the day, we need to stand up and come together to do that. That's why I love what Mother Teresa had to say here. It is never a singular journey, right? Nobody is successful, whatever success means, simply by going out on their own. The one man or the one woman myth is not true. It's never been true. All of us sitting here are standing on the shoulders of giants. That's how we all got here. We have an opportunity to innovate, to grow, to transcend what we as a human species have been suppressed by for the past couple hundred years, by different types of concepts like utilitarian capitalism or neoliberalism, or on the other side, just the traditional name of whatever a nation state actually truly means, right? The reason I tell you all of this is because your truth actually lies outside of your comfort zone, my friends, right? The illusion that you've been taught by your family or by your friends who want you to fit in, or particularly the education system, right? It's an illusion. It's not real. It never was real. When I flew into Vienna and had a friend who drove me here, we were talking actually about this slide. Her name's Petra. And I was telling her what's interesting to me about human psychology is we believe that we're supposed to fit in life, right? Our baseline foundation of thinking is that we're supposed to fit in, right? Tribalism and all the things that Seth Godin and folks like Simon Sinek talk about. But the fact of the matter is, my friends, fitting in is irrelevant in the new world. Fitting in is about culture. Fitting in is about being unique and different, and about understanding and celebrating our differences. Not actually just being in the middle, not actually just trying to attain equilibrium, not trying to be perfect. We're all dysfunctional by design. And that's okay, as long as we understand what's about to happen in the world and why, and having shared values. That's why you have to embrace the new creative energy, because either you're going to start riding the wave, and you're going to start being accountable, right? And you're going to start having shared values and talking about them, why you do what you do, what's your passion, what's your purpose, what's your cause, what's your belief, or you're not, right? And if you don't want to, that's okay. You can continue to ride up the ladder and go up the wall and do all the things that your parents did, for instance, right? Your parents think they have your best interest in mind, right? They tell you to get a nice job. They tell you certainly probably not to come here. And they certainly don't like folks like me who tell you that you're not supposed to do anything like what the lines or reality says you're supposed to do from school. I'm somebody who colors outside the lines or makes sure that the lines are made irrelevant in life. And more, those types of skill sets are what are going to matter in the world, right? Punching through walls instead of trying to go over walls. The most fundamental change we have to overcome demographically as human beings is the fact that boomers and Xers and Generation Z and millennials are completely opposite in terms of how they feel value in life, right? So boomers and Xers feel value by following commands. Millennials and Generation Z feel value by changing things. Think about that for a second. Think about the fact that all the folks who've created the structures, whatever they are, businesses, family structure, social structure, government structure, they all feel value by listening to commands. The majority of you are the millennial generation sitting in front of me right now in this packed room. What you care about is actually changing things. That's why the intersection of innovation, technology, culture, and justice matters so much, because it's up to you, the millennial generation and Generation Z, to understand what that opportunity means and to truly capitalize on it. Here's a little bit about my journey, right? So I've been around the world. I became a futurist by accident. Once you start traveling, you start to understand a little bit more about how the world works, right? They say you are where you travel. And so I built one of the world's largest event companies for entrepreneurs in the world. I've sat on boards for Fortune 50 companies, and I spend now a lot of my time traveling the world speaking, talking about the future, because unfortunately right now as humans, whether we're startup entrepreneurs, whether we're CEOs, whether we're mayors, governors, or prime ministers, a lot of the changes that are coming fundamentally that affect our social life, our culture, our values, most of us don't understand how the intersection of technology and culture is going to make for, let's just call it a little bit of a tsunami in the next decade, right? And the one thing that I've learned in the simplest way I can describe it to you folks is you're going to either decide within the next couple of years to be an island or an ocean, right? An island is something singular, it's isolated, it thinks it's self-sufficient, and then eventually, just like evolution teaches us, it dies. On the other hand, you can decide to be an ocean, something that's collective, community, rebirth, growth, inclusive. Right? The majority of us were taught about how to be an island. That's what you were indoctrinated with by your school system, right? But at the end of the day, isolation is death in the 21st century. Because things aren't going to slow down, they're only going to speed up. And that makes for some very interesting times. And it makes sure that we are forced to move. You are going to be forced to move. Mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. At a pace so rapid, within the next decade, that truly, unless you start to have the courage to stand up and come together now as friends, as family members, as community, to have those hard conversations with yourself about what's your passion, what's your purpose, what's your cause, what's your belief. To understand that you're dysfunctional by design and that's okay, and that you should embrace that. And allow that 11-step journey called the hero's journey to help make sure that you follow the right path. How many of you have ever heard of the hero's journey before? Raise your hand. Not too many of you. Make sure you look it up after this presentation. It's an 11-step cycle that every single one of us follow. It was built by a man named Joseph Campbell, who studied comparative mythology and comparative religion. Right? How many of you have heard of Star Wars? Raise your hand. How many of you have heard of The Matrix? Raise your hand. Hunger Games? Raise your hand. Right? Just about every movie that's grossed revenue over $1 billion follows this 11-step cycle. And the reason why is because we are addicted to movies that follow our same trajectory. Right? The 11-step cycle of the hero's journey. And so to get moving, and the hero's journey helps you to get moving because it provides momentum. Momentum is the excuse to transcend the ideology and the cultures that hold you back from being who you truly are as a human. Somebody who wants to create, somebody who wants to build meaningful change in this world. This is not a time to be afraid. I will tell you that right now. That's why I had all of you get up, and I talked a little bit briefly about culture in this region of the world. If you are afraid, if you clamp down and be isolated in the 21st century, particularly in this next decade, whether you're a person, family, community, company, nation, you will be isolated and you will die. In one way or another, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, or structurally. That is your destiny. And there's no reason for that. And the reason why is because we can win, we will win, we should win, as long as we're doing it together. Right? At the end of the day, you have to be part of the tsunami, not outside of the tsunami. My mentor once told me, Gary, the best thing you can understand about the world right now is there's a lot going on down there. It's a tsunami down there. But as long as you're up here riding the surfboard and you respect the tsunami down there, you're always going to be able to surf the ocean and the waves, and you're going to do just fine. Will you fall in just a little bit? Will you get your toe in there just a little bit? Yeah. Will it bite you? Will it nip you? Will it make you scared once in a while? Yes. Right? But that's where courage comes in. That's where resilience comes in. And that's why community matters so much. Because all of you sitting here are the connectors, are the rule breakers, are the innovators. All of you sitting here right now could fundamentally transform and restructure the entire region of this part of the world, right? As we collaborate, as we connect, as we stand up and come together, that is our opportunity, because life isn't about what you are given, it's about what you create. Think about that. Life in the 21st century is not about what you are given, it is about what you create. Right? Emergent, adaptive, and resilient environments are what are going to win in that type of a world. All of you sitting here today are a part of a tribe. That tribe believes in making the world a better place. Being resilient, being adaptive, and changing the world is really what matters. Because you have to go first. I believe fundamentally this region will allow innovation to be the root of change in this part of the world, in the region, and particularly even in the EU. With a sector of countries, triad countries that are so small, nimble, but have a collectivist culture, but also a lot of shared values that put creation, innovation, and opportunity first. There's very few places in the world where that opportunity is possible, and also where the public and private sectors have a good amount of access to each other. But my last point about being different, you have a lot of folks who talk about disruption, and I think it's the most worthless word in the world, because disruption means nothing, right? In a lot of ways. Disruption simply means you were an island for too long, right? But I'll tell you what, all over the world right now, we have movements happening, right? In where I come from, there's movements like Black Lives Matter. In Europe, there's different types of movements, and in Asia, there's also other movements. Lots of folks think that you can get justice through anarchy. I will tell you right now, the only way to be different without being dangerous is to do it as a community, to have a shared mission, vision, and values, right? And a strategy for doing the right things. Particularly now, because technology is accelerating intent at a level at which we can't control. We don't know, and the only way to make sure that we go forward are the right values. Because it's about uprooting, eradicating, and transforming into networks and structures that allow for emergent opportunities, politically, socially, and economically. Because I fundamentally believe what I think all of you believe, is that humans deserve better. And at the end of the day, the reason we are all here today is because we believe in our brothers and our sisters, all 7.4 billion of us. As long as we're happy, healthy, and have the ability to take care of our families, we can make the world a better place. Thank you very much.